Ready?
All right.
Okay, call ag planning to order. Kathy Feather couldn't be with us today, so I'm going to run the meeting, I guess. So we need a motion to accept the October 20th minutes.
I'll move.
Moved by Jay Skelly, seconded by James Griffith. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, carried. Okay, Laura, it looks like you have the whole show today, so welcome to showtime.
I feel so special.
Oh, Merry Christmas.
That's right. So I have a lot of updates for you today, so we'll just kind of run through them, starting with tourism. As we discussed in earlier meetings, our original I Love New York funding was supposed to be about $60,000. It became clear that given financial difficulties due to the pandemic, that it wasn't likely that we were going to get paid all of that, but we actually got a little bit more than I thought that we would. They did fully fund Q1 and Q2 at $28,000. I think it's fairly unlikely that they're going to fund quarters 3 and 4. We had cut the overall county budget by about 20%. So we're going to end up at the year end having spent about just a little bit over 100,000 from what was the original $152,000 budget. Airbnb, we have some good news in that, and I think this was reported earlier, we got a check from them for $11,000 for the month of September, and we got $7,000 for the month of October. Now, I actually mapped that against the data that we have been seeing in all the rooms, which has kind of informed us on the month over month and year over year growth of not only Airbnb, but some of the other venues. And there was actually a pretty substantial difference. And I kind of wanted to understand why. So I reached out to Airbnb. And essentially what we came up with is that Airbnb remits taxes at the time of booking. So frequently somebody is booking a stay potentially a few months in advance, whereas the data aggregators tend to try and aggregate data based on actual stays in a month. And I'm not sure exactly where all the rooms gets their data to aggregate, how much of it is estimated. But that actually does go a long way towards explaining the big difference, because again, a lot of these stays tend to be booked quite a bit in advance. So again, I think we're very happy to have the revenue. I just wanted an understanding of why it was so different than the numbers that we had been seeing, and I think we've explained that. I will also say that for 2021 on tourism, I don't think we're going to know if there's going to be any I Love New York funding until February or later. And at this point, it seems fairly doubtful that there will be any, but we haven't been informed anything for sure.
Okay, Laura, James, Griffith.
Yeah, before you go on, Laura, that difference that you were talking about, is that a positive difference with Airbnb, meaning we're getting more than what all the rooms is telling us, or is it a negative variance?
It's a negative variance. There was so what I looked at was gross receipts. Now, both all the rooms and Airbnb report on gross receipts, and then Airbnb backs out non-taxable amounts, which are stays that are more than 30 days. The variation was actually in the gross receipts number. Airbnb was reporting it 1 month it was about 40% higher, and then the next month it was over 40% higher. So again, there was quite a difference.
And they're telling you that they're submitting the taxes based on a booking,
Correct.
Not after the actual stay.
Correct.
So, Laura, does that mean that, I forget what our start date was. That means if our start date, say our start date was April 1st, which probably isn't right, but
September 1st.
September 1st.
September 1st.
September 1st. So if you booked anything between January and September for any time even up through the end of the year, those aren't even included now. it was anything booked after September 1st is all we're getting. So even if your stay was booked for December and you booked in July, you aren't getting paid for that.
Right, and that's understood.
But I mean,
But my question is if they're taking and paying the sales tax on it before the person stays, there's no service that's rendered. The only thing that's been rendered is the processing of reservation,
right,
which is an advance deposit. So in this case, like that answer from Airbnb doesn't flow in my head. I'm not.
Yeah, because what happens if something's canceled?
Right, if it cancels. So are they reconciling that, based on cancellations later? That's what I don't know, and I don't want to get into the minutia of it. But their answer kind of confused me in regards to they're paying the sales tax revenue based on the booking.
What's wrong with you? It's almost Christmas. Supervisors getting minutia. What is the problem here? Go ahead, Laura.
I agree with you, Mr. Griffith, and I. There's been an ongoing discussion about the fact that because we don't have the right to audit, we don't have the right to look at any of their data, our contract basically says they send us a check and we say thank you very much. So I had to approach them very carefully because I didn't want to imply that anybody was doing anything wrong. I'm just trying to understand what the differences are. And we had actually thought that all the rooms was purchasing data, but according to Airbnb, they are not. Airbnb is not selling the data. So I might want to try and dig a little bit deeper into where all the rooms is getting their data. I would never have expected it to be an exact match, but I was a little surprised at how far off it was, which is why I tried to reach out to Airbnb. And that's the explanation I got.
No problem. Thank you.
Any other questions? Tourism?
Go ahead.
Okay. So EDN planning. As you all know, when we dismantled the county planning board, we replaced it with a planning agency, which does all of the intermunicipal reviews. And it was set up as a 3-member board, including Chris DeBolt. So with Chris's departure, we have a vacancy on the agency. I am recommending that we replace Chris with Allison Gaddy. Allison is a senior planner at Lake George, Lake Champlain Regional Planning Board. We are already funding that board, and that's a service that they are able and willing to provide us. Allison has extensive experience at the intermunicipal reviews. She, in fact, used to be the senior planner in Saratoga who did those reviews, and she's willing to serve on the board. So my ask would be for the committee to recommend to the full board that we appoint Allison Gaddy to the planning agency.
I'll move that, Brian.
Okay, moved by James Griffith, second by Jay Skelly. One question, Laura, does she understand the difference between Washington and Saratoga and Warren counties? I assume she does.
Yeah, she does. So as I'm sure you're all aware, the Lake Champlain, Lake George Regional Planning Board serves 5 counties. So they're well aware of the fact that they have to be cognizant that, all counties have some things in common and all counties are different.
Okay.
Okay.
Henke?
Was there some reason to have the county administrator on
the
that
only
planning?
reason the county administrator was on the agency was because the county administrator was the only one in the building that had the relevant planning experience.
Okay.
So it wasn't by virtue of the administrator position, it was his experience, and Allison's qualifications fill that.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Excellent.
Okay.
Next.
A couple of just updates on other projects. The DPW shared services project, which I think Deb has discussed it at her meetings. So we've closed that out, submitted all of the paperwork to the state. So we're basically just waiting for reimbursement on that, as we did all of the administration for that here. The LWRP grant, which is the grant that's managing the Fort Ann to Whitehall Trail project. Unfortunately, that project has not made very much progress this year, largely because we have had a very, very difficult time engaging the attention of CP Rail. I think we've just started to get their attention, but meanwhile, just so the board knows, we were able to submit all of the reporting and paperwork to the state, and we have been reimbursed by the state for all of the work that was done to date. Sorry, you have a question?
So that's good. That's nice to hear. That doesn't always happen with the state.
Well, the major reason we were able to accomplish it is, you know, as with every grant, there's a match. This grant consisted of a very small amount of it was $460,000 grant. We matched it with $26,000 in cash, which we have yet to have to pay out. But the bulk of the match was in-kind services. So we demonstrated a huge dollar value in kind. And because we were able to do that, pretty much every dollar we've spent so far has been reimbursed.
Great job.
Census grant, we are submitting the paperwork on that, and we'll be waiting for the final check from them on that, but that's pretty much closed out. Also wanted to let you know, again, going back to Lake George, Lake Champlain Regional Planning Board, they were awarded about $300,000 to do a 5-county economic recovery plan. So we are participating in that process as well. Also want to give you an update on jobs data. So the latest unemployment rate that I have data for the county says that we are at 5.2%, which is down from a high during the worst early months of COVID when it was at like 15 to 17%. But I just want to make the board aware, the unemployment claims started rising again the week of December 5th. So we went from summer averages of just under 100 to it's now up to more like 175 and higher. So it's creeping up again. The other thing to make you aware of is that one of the...
Yeah, I had a question on that. Is it creeping back up because people that are now looking for a job as opposed to they stop looking for a job? Do we have more individuals entering back into workforce looking for work?
So that actually was kind of my next point. Some of this data is questionable for a number of reasons. There's been some analysis that's done that said the overall unemployment rates can actually be a little bit misleading because the way the unemployment rate is calculated is they first determine the size of the labor pool, and then they divide that by the number of people who are looking for jobs. So once somebody stops looking for a job or proving that they're looking for a job, they're removed from the overall labor pool. So that affects the actual calculation. So estimates are that the overall labor pool over the summer may have decreased by about 2%. So to my mind, that's people who may have just retired out of the labor force. It's also people who have just given up looking for Lwrp because of, you know, you've got kids, you can't have daycare, you have transportation issues, kids are working at home. So those people may have actually stopped looking for a job. So ultimately, if they start looking again, the actual size of the labor pool would increase, which would then affect those unemployment numbers. So I guess my overall comment on that is I wouldn't take the fact that the unemployment rate at 5.2%, which is significantly lower than that 15 to 17%, is quite as low as it appears. I think there are still a lot of people in the county who are affected by the ability to get work, whether they're looking for it or not. Did that answer your question, James?
Yep. Sorry to steal your thunder.
So just in relation to that, as you all know, there's a new federal stimulus package that's been voted on, early on in terms of what the details look like, but I picked out a couple of things that are certainly relevant to the employment, which is that it does extend the $300 a month unemployment out to mid-March. But interestingly, it does solve a problem where, especially in Washington County, where we have a lot of self-employed people who might also have part-time jobs. So what the new package did is it recognized the value of those that are, they may have self-employment in addition to a W-2. And in addition to that $300 a month in unemployment, they will be getting an additional $100 a month to cover losses from self-employment, or they will be eligible for it. Also, the EIDL, which is $10,000 in grants to individuals in low-income communities. Not real clear on what the rules are going to look like for that and what they mean by low-income communities, but that $10,000 grant is back. There was also a provision in there, $400 million in New York to subsidize dairy, which is essentially going to allow dairy product donations. It will cover the cost of that, which in the overall intent is to minimize food waste, because as we all know, dairy has been hard hit. It also extends the PPP funding out to March 31st, and it also solved another problem that we've had in several areas of the county, which is that it has a specific set aside for cultural institutions and theater. So the likes of the Strand, Hubbard Hall, Slate Valley Museum can now potentially get assistance through the PPP program. It also cleared up what has been a looming tax nightmare for many of the people who accepted PPP in the first round. There have been serious questions as to whether the gross income had to be calculated, including the amounts of the original PPP loan that was forgiven, i.e. the grant portion of it. And this clarifies that it does not, so it will not be taxable income. And it also allows, this has been another major business question, did business expenses that would normally be deducted on a business's tax return, like payroll, if they were paid for by PPP, the IRS had been contending that that was taxable income. So this current round of stimulus has negated that and said that it's not taxable, i.e. the businesses can still take the deduction. Okay, so that's what I have on the PPP for now. Any questions on that? Again, there's a huge amount in that. I only picked out a couple of pieces that I thought were relevant. Okay, so on to solar. A couple of months ago, I sent out an email to everybody giving you the information about all of the hearings that were being held around the state regarding the Office of Renewable Energy siting proposed regulations. I just wanted to let you know that it appears that NISAC had essentially the same concerns that I did, and they wrote a letter responding to those hearings, saying that their number one concern is the ability of ORIS to disregard any local law if they find it burdensome to hitting their targets of permitting large-scale solar. They also commented that one of the things that ORIS is required to do is review local comprehensive plans, but not local laws. That's a problem for us because we don't have very many communities that even have comprehensive plans. They also indicated another serious concern in that they believe that the regulations pose a serious risk to open farmland. So not sure what the end result of that will be. The next step for ORIS is going to be to finalize the regulations and put them into place. But on everybody's behalf, NISAC did sort of send those objections out. Questions on that? Okay, moving on. Dewatering facility funding. going back to last February, before COVID hit and the world went to heck, you may recall that I did a presentation looking at the overall dewatering facility and the need to stop reacting to things that were that were coming in and start planning related to infrastructure needs. What industries could we attract? What utilities need to happen out there. So I worked with Beth at the Lake George Regional Planning Board, and an application went into USDA, which was subsequently funded for $99,000, which we also obviously want to thank Elise Stefanik. She advocated on our behalf for that. So unfortunately, the IDA, having experienced some revenue losses related to WL Plastics not coming in, there was some concern about the match that was required for that USDA grant. So I was able to reach out to National Grid, and they generously are putting in $90,000 to match the $99,000 in grid, which gives the IDA $190,000 to basically, the RFP went out as essentially to evaluate infrastructure needs, look at the feasibility of a regional composting facility, look at how marketable the site is, what industries could be attracted, and then look at some other demographic and economic data to develop an overall plan for what could work at the dewatering facility. The proposals are in, and a committee is reviewing the proposals, so that process should start fairly shortly. In addition to that, as we all know, planning is a big piece of it, but the underlying concern of the bridge has always been there and remains. And we also know that wastewater is going to be a significant hurdle to get over if you're going to develop that site, with anything other than one or two small companies. So again, working with Beth at Lake Champlain, Lake George, she submitted an application with the intention was to fund the replacement of the bridge and fund the engineering for connecting to the existing wastewater system. Unfortunately, she was only able to put in the NBRC application, which was subsequently awarded because EDA, which was the second half of that equation, required a document that's going to cost about $15,000 to produce. Fortunately, the planning portion of it, funded by USDA and National Grid, will pay for that document. So once that document is completed, then we have the ability to get the EDA grant submitted, which again, the total of the two of them, and there may end up being another somewhere between $100 and $300 that's necessary depending on the final budget, but it'll enable the submission of that EDA grant, which will in large part pay for the bridge, and if not all of the engineering to get connected to the wastewater plant, at least most of it. Any questions on that?
Excuse me, Laura. On Friday at the board meeting, when Betty Little was with us, she alluded to the fact that she's trying to protect $1 million in wastewater money. I'm assuming that that's the original FE1A money. Have you heard any more about that?
I'm glad you mentioned that because I heard that and I meant to follow up on it. I'm assuming the same thing, that it's the original FE1A money, but that money would be totally different than the money used for the engineering to get wastewater to the dewatering facility. They're two different projects.
I understand, but if the money's protected, that might give us some options, is why I'm asking.
Oh, yes, and you're right. And again, thank you for reminding me because I noted that and I wanted to follow up on, what the status of that is.
Yeah, because my no went to a maybe after I heard her say that. So
yeah, I think we had thought that that with her departure that the funding was going to be lost, But again, I heard her say that on Friday, so I'm hopeful that there was a way, perhaps in partnership with Dan to keep it protected. So yeah, I need to follow up on that.
Thank you.
That would go a long ways in getting sewer down there to the dewatering facility.
Well, that million would improve portions of the existing network of collection systems in Fort Edward, which, yes, would ultimately make it easier to develop connections to the dewatering facility, but they are sort of two different pieces of the bigger project of getting wastewater all throughout Fort Edward improved. Other questions on that?
Dave O'Brien.
So, Laura, I really want to thank you for the efforts in helping us to map a way down there. It's been a series of ups and downs, as everyone knows. We thought we had a prospect coming in to take care of the past due taxes and open up the balance of the facility for development. I think that there is a path forward. We have been planning with the IDA how to move forward on that. We have several different options we're looking at. In terms of the pre-engineering on the bridge, I'm signing the contract today to get that done. So hopefully we'll get it done pretty quickly, and then we can submit for the EDA. But I think that getting the bridge replaced will be good. But we also found out from DOT that eventually that road would go into that bridge would go in the inventory. But they're not going to replace any bridge until it's ready to be replaced. But I think there are some benefits to getting that bridge replaced prior to that. So we are moving forward to trying to get the full funding to get that bridge replaced, as well as moving forward to get the sewer infrastructure in place, because that seems to be the second red flag that's down there, is that every company's been down there needs sewer. And while some companies have been willing to help fund that, it's just the time to get that engineered and constructed is not in their time frame. So the more we can do to get that in there, the better off we'll be. We do have some potential purchasers of portions of that we're talking to. One seems a lot more promising than others, but we'll see what happens from them. The other item is that I just got word from the WCC's attorneys. They are clearing the purchase of the transfer of the three pieces of road owned by WCC, and hope to get that accomplished in the first week in January. So that's the update. So thanks, Laura.
Yeah, I also want to thank Beth Gillis. I mean, between Beth and I can't tell you how much narrative got wrote, forms got filled out, etc. But it's getting done slowly but surely.
It's all going to pay off. It's just going to take a little more time.
Yep. So moving on to other funding I want to make you aware of. DEC contacted me a while ago. They, in the past, have had a program that funded the replacement of septic systems on eligible water bodies. DEC is considering, it's not for sure, that there will be a round 2 of that septic system replacement program. And there are 2 eligible water bodies in the county. One is Casayuna and the other is Lake George. So we were able to identify about 750 parcels that are within 150 feet of those 2 water bodies, sort of in the Argyle Greenwich area around Casayuna, and then Putnam, Dresden, Fort Ann on the Lake George side. If that program is funded, it will be a 50-50 match program where the state would kick in up to $10,000 to replace failing septic systems. So I worked with Corinna at Soil and Water and Beth at Lake George, Lake Champlain Planning Board. And we believe that if they invite us to apply, Corinna has the ability to manage the program. It would simply be a matter of soliciting interest for those that can come up with, offering somebody $10,000 to replace their septic system doesn't help if they don't have the other septic system, or the other $10,000. But the program will go a long way towards improving water quality along those two water bodies. So we're anticipating that if it is funded, it'll be sometime in the spring. Okay, on to broadband. As many of you are aware, we have a small broadband provider down in the southern end of the county called Bounce Links. They sent notices out to all of their customers last week that they would be shutting down effectively this week, or in some cases the following week. So we have been scrambling to identify how many people are affected, what the issues are. I will say that so far the owner of Bounce Links is not communicating directly with us or with me. He is, however, talking to one or two of his customers. We are estimating that there's probably less than 100 households that are involved. I will tell you that there have been some offers from some of the other carriers to provide some services that might help to keep him in business, but those don't seem to have been well received so far. So I can only say at this point, the state has been notified, Public Service Commission has been notified, but unfortunately, they are not regulated as a carrier of last resort. Therefore, the state's ability to do anything about it may be pretty limited. But we are all working together. I've been contacted by a number of people who have the service, as have some of the other providers. Our goal is to make sure that those people who are going to lose service, many of them with kids at home trying to do schoolwork, have some kind of an option. But it's made particularly difficult by the fact that the owner of the company won't communicate with us. So we are doing the best we can to address the situation and hopefully get some alternatives to the customers. Questions on that? Okay. On that line, I want to make you aware the Ardoff funding, which is the Federal Rural Digital Opportunity Fund funding. We talked about that earlier in the year, where the eligible census blocks were across the county. I can tell you that $9.1 billion was just funded across the United States. Out of that, Slick Network Solutions and SpaceX were funded for 567 new passings in the county. Now they actually underfunded slightly round one, so that's leaving 11.2 billion for round two. Now round one, we're back to the fully unserved census blocks things. Our hope is that round two will allow underserved or partially served census blocks to be eligible. My goal would be to find a way to map those out. We've talked about this before. The problem with that is that it's going to have a cost attached to it. So I'm trying to strategize as to how we might do that. But if we can find a way to map out those areas of the county that will not be served once the Broadband for All program is completed, it may be that we can work with some of the providers to put in some requests for the round two of that. Now, unfortunately, because of the way the program rules work, the two providers that were awarded funding, which again are SpaceX and Slick, we legally can't talk to them until after the 29th of January, because there was a quiet period that was put in there in which the providers can't legally answer any questions. So I can't tell you exactly where these passings are, but there are maps on the website where you can sort of hover over an area and get an indication as to which provider was awarded. There was quite a large chunk up in the Dresden area. I did communicate that back to Paul Ferguson. There's a couple of decent sized chunks on the Eastern Salem side, and then there are some sort of smaller spots here and there. So for those of you who are not familiar with what SpaceX is, because this is the first time that we've heard of them operating in the county, SpaceX is owned by Elon Musk, who also owns Tesla. He has a subsidiary called Starlink. Starlink is a satellite solution, but it is different than HughesNet and some of the other providers out there in that what they do is opposed to basically the orbit of their satellites are smaller and they orbit lower. So the testing of these, these networks and their speed, et cetera, the results have actually so far been pretty promising. It's looking like that network may be able to meet fiber speeds and latency. Latency is how slow the signal is back and forth. Unfortunately, however, Starlink everywhere right now is still in beta test. So you can sign up for it. It costs about $100 a month and it costs about $500 to get the equipment running. What the price is going to be subsidized by the Ardoff funding, I don't know. I don't know what the longer term pricing strategy is going to be, but for right now at $99 a month and $500 to install it, it's on the expensive side. It's also beta, which means that anybody using it right now may experience outage periods, et cetera. But having said all of that, all of the data that I see and the testing and the reports that have been written are saying that as an alternative for some of the remote areas that we know we have a lot of, it's going to be maybe not as good as fiber, but significantly better than some of the other satellite solutions out there. If anybody wants to look at the map of where the awards were, I can email you the address, the website address. It's on the FCC website, or I can give it to you now. But essentially, like I said, all you can really do is sort of hover over the area, and you'll be able to tell whether it's slick or whether it's Starlink. So that was pretty much what I have to report.
Oh, it's all good news, though.
We'll take it for end of year, right?
You know, other than bouncing everybody at Christmas, no, all the news was good. I mean, money reinstated that we didn't see the second quarter of I Love New York coming, even though we have no way of figuring out what the number is from the Airbnb, at least it's money, and it's coming. And it wasn't coming before, so I mean, we're going to be happy with that. The dewatering facility seems to be moving along, and it just all takes time to come together, but that's what proper planning does.
Right? Yeah, I will say that, it's a year of COVID. So, the analogy that I use, that it's been kind of like swimming in molasses, but things are still getting done and things are still moving forward.
Better than swimming in cement.
Yeah, that's true.
Dave.
I mentioned this to Laura yesterday, but I was having a conversation with Kevin Egan from Spectrum about one area in Hampton that needs to be covered. Doesn't matter. He was saying that their commitment to with the settlement with the PSC, they will be completing their commitment probably first quarter next year. And they also have two pots of money that was in the broadband program of about $24 million that they will be wanting to start working with Washington County and other counties to identify the gaps they could potentially fill in there. So they're willing to at least work with us to help identify areas they could assist in and see if we can get some build out there. So that's a promising point. And I think we'll have to work with, as Laura said, the rest of the providers like Verizon and Slick and everyone else to help fill in the other gaps too.
Yeah, I'd actually like to reach out to Spectrum, because I can tell you that one of the Bounce Links customers did reach out to Spectrum, who are not very far. It kind of goes back to the old poles owned by National Grid versus who's paying for what, but he was quoted $20,000 to get hooked up to Spectrum. So it's kind of like back to some of the earlier problems that we were having before the Spectrum build out. But yeah, I intend to reach out to Spectrum to see if there's any coverage that they can provide related to the problem down in the southern end of the county.
Well, Laura, with what Dave just said, is it worth incorporating that fact in there? I mean, if that could be substantiated, they might be willing to go to that area where they know, when they know a group is leaving that's a provider, boy, that's a wide open space for them if they can jump quick.
Yeah, I agree completely.
Elma,
Yeah, I just wanted to say what a difference 2 years makes. Listening to Laura's report today about working with Beth Gillis and Karina over at Soil and Water, getting some of this stuff done, it just goes to prove that together we're stronger. So Laura, I wanted to personally thank you. And Dave, if you could send my thanks onto the Regional Planning Board, and Jay, if you could send my thanks onto the Soil and Water, that partnership that you talked about with the three of you, it's amazing how much you can actually leverage when we work together. So thank you all.
yeah, and I think to go on top of that is the communication. There's where communication works, and like you said, bounce links won't even return a call. That's when communication doesn't work. Those are just two opposites of the spectrum automatically. That just shows it, and that's why we need to be better at it. But great job, everyone. Any more questions for Laura? Any other business? If not, I guess we're adjourned.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.